Taz, I feel like I have achieved one of my life goals, which is going to sound really crazy, but I've always wanted to be one of those like cozy gaming girls. And I feel like
Oh yeah.
I am that girl now. I feel like I've had so many attempts at being one of those girls and they've
Mhm.
never quite stuck. But as you know, and some of the listeners might know, I recently bought a Switch, which by the way
Mhm.
was really annoying because I bought my Switch and then Nintendo announced the Switch 2 like a few months later. But anyway, that's not
Yeah,
coming out till
literally
next year.
after
So
Christmas as well, wasn't it?
yeah, but to be fair, I don't think it will come out until I reckon honestly like autumn
Mm.
or winter time. Like I think it's going to be like later on in the year, so it's fine. But yeah, so I recently bought a Switch and I've actually like got back into Animal Crossing. Hello Kitty Island Adventure just came out, which is just I feel like that game was literally
It's so
made for me and
you.
I've just been
Yeah.
loving it.
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised that you didn't get into it sooner because obviously like you're known for your desk setup and like your cute aesthetic vibes, and the amount of girls I've seen with Switch games and like cozy Switch games, and they all have a really aesthetic setup and they'll
Yeah.
play the game on their setup. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, Liv, why haven't you done this sooner? But I'm so glad that you have, because I'm a Switch girly. I love playing on my Switch. I don't really do it too much now because I feel like it's cold weather activity
Yeah,
vibes, like
100%.
hence the cozy element. But I love Zelda, anything Zelda, so you should definitely try that.
This makes me laugh every time. I just can't imagine you playing. What is the concept of Zelda?
It's just like a free roaming game, right? And you're this like magical person. Oh my god, I'm gonna butcher this description and everyone's gonna come for me. But you're like a
Probably.
magical person and you basically gain powers. Your name's Link and you've got to basically come to the rescue of this princess called Zelda. But it's just
Okay.
so good because you like fight monsters, but you also have to do like tasks along the way to like gain your new powers. And obviously it gets progressively harder, but there's so much that you can do in between, and the whole world that you're in is like free roaming, so you literally can just run anywhere. And I was so obsessed with this game. Like Breath of the Wild, there's a new one that's come out which I'm kind of midway through playing, but Breath of the Wild, I was so obsessed with it. I would finish like the day and my eyes would be bloodshot, and then when I would sleep I would literally sleep dream about running through the
Is
fields
that?
in Zelda. And like it was such a great dream to have, I'm not gonna lie, so I would
Oh my
definitely
gosh.
recommend. That's my cozy
See,
game recommendation.
is that crazy though? Because I don't really get those games, and I feel like this is the reason that I struggle to get into games because games stress me the fuck out. Like, if I have to fight someone, I will lose it. Like, I can't deal with the stress. Like, it's not enjoyable. I just feel stressed, and also I'm the type of person like the minute I lose, I'm like, no, I don't want to play anymore. Like, I'm such a sore loser. So that's why I
Mm,
like games like Animal Crossing because I don't have to fight anyone. I just like walk around, catch some fish, catch some bugs,
mm.
plant some roses, and do you know what I mean? Like, there's no opportunity for me to lose.
I feel like the characters in Animal Crossing really annoy me, like the villagers really annoy me. Like I just find
Oh
them really
no, they're sweet.
grating. No, they're
No,
not. There's a few
sweet.
villagers that are literally so annoying.
How can you be annoyed by a cute little game character?
No, some of them are so sassy.
Yeah, that is true, to be fair. Because in Hello Kitty Island Adventure, it literally is like Animal Crossing, but the characters, like, they don't ever want to talk to you. So if you go up to talk to them, they're like, what do you want? And I don't know why that pisses me off because I'm
Mm,
like,
I know. Excuse
like,
me.
how rude.
Literally. No, I like Zelda because it's kind of like you're just on your own all the time. And you can like ride
Mm.
horses and stuff and swim, and I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
It's
I
just
should give it a
fun.
go. Maybe I should
You
give it a
should.
go. But I find what you said about the game being free roaming really interesting because I feel like there is a part of today's episode that you are going to find really interesting and it's going to relate back to that. So in today's
Hmm.
episode, we are talking all about the conspiracy theory that we are possibly living in a simulation, which, let me tell you, sounds absolutely crazy. And I'm honestly shocked by what I found by doing the research for today's
Oh.
episode. And I cannot wait any longer to get into it. So let's go.
This is Debunked by the 𝗃𝗂𝗁𝗁 podcast,
hosted by Liv and Taz, two girls exploring the world of science and tech, unfiltered.
This season, we're separating fact from fiction as we dive into the world's most controversial conspiracy theories by seeing if science can prove or disprove them.
And of course, we're still serving up the laboraTEA
Because the STEM world is messier than you think.
Don't forget, all opinions are our own, and all of our listener stories are alleged. Let's get into this week's episode of Debunked. A few years ago for my brother's birthday, we went to like one of those VR arcades, you know, where you like strap on a headset and then suddenly you are in a completely different world. I can't even remember what games we were playing. We did like a few different ones. So you did like, I don't know, maybe like a racing one, then maybe a fighting one. And I actually got so into it. But then something happened. So I was inside the game, fully immersed. The world around me felt so real. I could see walls, objects, even like shadows were shifting as I moved. And at one point, I like instinctively reached out to lean on a wall, a completely normal action, something like you wouldn't even think about it in real life, right? Except obviously that wall wasn't real, and my hand went straight through it and I crashed onto the floor like a complete idiot. My mum burst out laughing, like she thought it was so funny, but for a split second my brain refused to accept what had just happened. And that moment kind of stayed with me because it made me wonder if I could be fooled that easily, like if my brain could be tricked into accepting something fake as real, then how can I ever be sure that the world I'm in now, the one that I'm experiencing right this second, isn't also just an illusion? And this is the theory at the heart of today's episode, the simulation theory. And the more we look for evidence that this theory is real, the more we find. Or maybe the more the simulation wants us to find.
I'm so excited for this episode because we also touched on it in a previous episode, the origins of consciousness, and how like if we could like replicate consciousness in a model, then we could like download our consciousness to a simulated world or something. So yeah, I'm so excited for this.
So here's the thing, the whole idea of reality being an illusion, it is not just some sci-fi concept. So scientists, philosophers, and even tech billionaires have seriously debated whether we're actually living in a simulation. And what's wild is that this isn't even just a modern idea. So bear with me because I'll tell you why I think this is cool. But the thought that reality isn't real dates back thousands of years. And one of the oldest recorded versions of this idea comes from ancient Hindu philosophy, which talks about something called Maya. And Maya is this concept that the physical world is an illusion. So it's not real in the way that we think it is. And in Hindu texts like the Upanishads, reality is described as a kind of dream. It's basically like the ancient version of we're living in a simulation. And what I find really weird is, like, how did they come up with this concept? Because I think the idea that we live in a simulation is really easy for, not for us to accept, but for us to understand, because we have computer games, we understand computing, so we can see the idea behind this theory, right? Because like we play games which are essentially like simulations of worlds. But how did they come up with this concept before they knew anything about computing or video games?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think it's so much easier to think about a simulated world because we do almost like perform our own simulations, right? Like with all the games that we have and things like that. So I thought it was a more sort of modern take on, I don't know, like a thought process about us being in a simulation for sure.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because in 2003, this idea went from being like some abstract philosophical idea from like BC. Sorry, every time I mention BC, it makes me laugh. But in 2003, a philosopher named Nick Bostrom at Oxford University published a paper that basically brought this whole theory back to life. But this time, he brought it back to life with a serious scientific argument. And he introduced something called the simulation trilemma, which, when you break it down, suggests that at least one of these three things must be true. So, number one, civilizations never reach the point where they can create simulations because they destroy themselves first. Number two, they do reach the point where they're able to create simulations, but they choose for some reason not to simulate past realities. Or number 3, we are already inside a simulation. And according to Bostrom's logic, if advanced civilizations do have the capability to create simulations, then statistically speaking, it is way more likely that we are in a simulation than not. And this wasn't just a fun what if scenario anymore. This was actually, well, it's became a serious scientific discussion.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? But I guess what actual evidence do we have? Like, is there evidence to say that we could be in a simulation? Like, where is the proof?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to preface this by saying that, like, I'm starting with the most questionable evidence first, but like, as we go on, I swear to God, you are going to be convinced, okay? So let's start off by talking about the fact that if we are in a simulation, then surely we would experience glitches, right? You know how people say, like, oh, there's glitches in the Matrix. It's a glitch in the Matrix. Well, these so-called glitches could actually explain some of the strangest experiences that people report. So if we take the Mandela effect, for example, which is the phenomenon where large groups of people remember events differently than how they supposedly actually happened in real life. Some people believe that this is just like a quirk of memory. But if we were in a simulation that occasionally needed to rewrite or tweak reality, it could explain why we remember old versions of it, almost like residual data from an earlier patch. Then there's déjà vu, which is like the eerie sensation that you've already lived through a moment before. But what if it's not just like a brain glitch, but it's something deeper, like the simulation briefly reloading or running the same sequence twice? And then there are quantum oddities, which we are going to get more into later on because I think it's the most interesting part about this whole theory. But basically, at the smallest scales, physics starts behaving unpredictably, almost as if reality isn't fully determined until it's observed. Like I said, something we're going to get onto later in the episode because it is crazy.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to touch on the observed physics thing, because that's quite a new thing that they've discovered. And I remember going to see like a Brian Cox show and he touched on it and I just thought it was mad. And also something like the Mandela effect, like, is so true, because I swear, you know, the Monopoly guy, he had a monocle. So where that guy went, I do not know. But just to be like devil's advocate, not like something like deja vu or the Mandela effect be explained by psychology.
Yeah, that is true, I guess. Psychologists say that it's due to memory reconstruction. So apparently our brains don't store perfect records and they fill in the gaps with familiar patterns. Like, I swear, for example, like a few other examples, that Pikachu had a black tip on his tail, but apparently he never did. But like, I can picture it in my head. And
Me too.
there's like the other famous one of how so many people recall the phrase "mirror, mirror on the wall" from Snow White, but the actual line has always been apparently "magic mirror on the wall." But that doesn't really explain, like we said, like why so many people remember the things the same way. And it definitely doesn't explain weirder glitches, like people vanishing, objects appearing and disappearing, or quantum physics behaving like reality isn't fully rendered until observed. So sure, maybe it is just psychology, or maybe it's the simulation patching itself.
I'm kind of with you on the Mandela effect. Like, I just think it's so weird, but I feel like we need more science. We need more science to back up this theory. So
the theory, yeah. Okay, well, let's start with something simple, scale. So the universe is massive, 93 billion light years across, and it's filled with trillions of galaxies, each with billions of stars. Now, given that sheer size, you would think that we would see more unpredictability, more randomness, but instead we see something strange: mathematical precision. Every fundamental constant in physics, the speed of light, the charge of an electron, is incredibly fine-tuned. Even the tiniest variation in these values would make the universe completely uninhabitable. So if the laws of physics broke down, we would literally dissolve. And it sounds wild, but some scientists take this idea very seriously. So Max Tegmark is a cosmologist at MIT, and he argues that the universe's mathematical precision could be a sign of underlying code, because physics doesn't just sort of work, it works with insane precision. The speed of light, atomic structure, gravity, everything follows rigid equations. Now, if the universe was naturally occurring, wouldn't we expect a bit more chaos, a bit more randomness? but instead we see perfectly tuned mathematical laws, as if the universe was programmed with a strict set of rules, just like a simulation or just like a video game.
This is actually kind of creepy. Does that mean then that our perception of reality, I guess, is limited by whatever resolution the simulation allows us to see? Like, obviously, in like a VR game, the resolution isn't convincing enough, but like our reality now is very convincing.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I feel like that brings us to the Planck length, which is the smallest possible unit of space. So the Planck length is 1.6 times 10 to the power of minus 35 meters. And it's so tiny that if we blew up a single atom to the size of the observable universe, the Planck length would be the size of a grain of sand. So it is literally the smallest thing that we can comprehend, yeah? But this is where things get weird, because below this scale, space-time itself breaks down. So in a naturally occurring universe, space should be infinitely divisible, no? Like, you should always be able to zoom in further. But instead, we find that we hit a hard limit, like a pixel in a digital image. So like, if you were looking at your phone, obviously, like, your screen on your phone is made up of pixels, yeah? And like, you can only zoom in realistically to the size of a pixel. You can't go any further than that, because it's like programmed that way. Do you know what I mean? So now we have like a pixel size for reality. But if the universe is programmed, it should also have error correction, right? Like a system that detects and fixes mistakes, just like in computer code. And guess what? It does. So a physicist called James Gates, he is a theoretical physicist at the University of Maryland. And he actually wasn't even trying to prove simulation theory. He wasn't working on simulation theory. And in fact, I actually think that he thought it was like some crazy theory, and he was like very, very against it. But he started studying quarks and electrons in string theory. So he was specifically looking at the equations that make up string theory, right? And what he found was actual binary computer code, so self-correcting binary code, embedded in the fundamental equations of the universe. So let me repeat that. The laws of physics contain the same error-correcting code that we use in computers to prevent data corruption, which blew my mind. Yeah.
But why would reality need like a built-in error correction unless it was being like processed data?
Yeah. This is literally what I thought. Like, if I, for example, like if I go out into my, I don't know, I go out into my garden, yeah, and I start like digging, I don't know, like maybe I'm trying to plant some pre-plants or something, and then I find a USB drive like in the soil. Like, I wouldn't just assume that it came out of nowhere, yeah? Like, I'm gonna assume that someone put it there. And that's what Gates said, is like, why is there binary code like in the equations for string theory? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So Gates' discovery suggests that the underlying structure of a reality isn't random, but it's engineered. So now we have like the smallest pixel size, built-in error correction, and a universe that runs on mathematical precision. So if someone was designing a simulation, this is actually exactly what we would expect to see, yeah?
This is literally blowing my mind. What? Okay, so from my experience, right, I feel like I don't know, this is the hard question to ask, because isn't there something about the universe that there's like chaos theory, and there's a reason for not everything following like a strict set of rules like you've described. Like, the universe isn't like completely stable, it's unpredictable. Like, humans supposedly have free will, things like that. And I guess like small changes can lead to massive consequences, like the butterfly effect kind of thing. So how could you simulate that? Wouldn't a simulation be like more controlled than what we actually observe?
Yeah, that is a really good point. And so you mentioned chaos theory. So for any of the listeners who don't know, like, chaos theory is a huge rabbit hole that you can get into. But overall, like Tad says, chaos theory is the idea that tiny random changes can eventually snowball into unpredictable massive effects. So we love our women in STEM analogies on this podcast. So for example, you know how like when you curl your hair for hours, like I hate this when this happens. So like I'll be curling my hair and then I step outside and then, for example, like maybe it's really humid outside or it rains and then it just ruins your hair like instantly. That's basically like the idea behind chaos theory. So it's just like one tiny little thing can change a lot. Yeah, because then maybe it like ruins your day. Maybe then your photos look shit. You don't get hired because you went for like a model. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like the snowball effect. This is also the reason why like weather forecasts can't predict things accurately more than like a few days ahead. And the tiniest variation, like a gust of wind or a single atom moving differently, can completely change how a storm develops. But the best example is, and you just hinted at it, is the butterfly effect. And this is quite literally the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could cause a chain of events that actually eventually causes a hurricane halfway across the world. And it literally sounds ridiculous, but here is how it works. So the butterfly, let's say like it flies off of a tree and the butterfly's wings slightly alter the air around it. That small shift then changes how air currents move, and those small shifts build up and eventually influence larger weather systems. And over time, the effects all compound, eventually snowballing into a huge event, like a hurricane, a cyclone, or like even a volcanic eruption. So how does this relate to simulation theory? Like, let's tie it back to simulation theory. So if the universe, like Taz kind of hinted at, if the universe was a controlled program, you would expect some level of stability. So the programmers, whoever they are, which we'll get to later, would want to avoid chaos spiraling out of control. But as Taz said, the real world is chaotic, so weather patterns go haywire. Entire species can evolve from like random genetic mutation. Asteroids can wipe out civilizations, and even markets crash because one billionaire tweets something dumb. But that's not how simulations usually work. That's how natural emergent systems behave. And yet, even within this chaos, we still see reoccurring mathematical patterns. And that brings us to something even stranger: the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio. So the Fibonacci sequence is a famous series of numbers: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. And basically, a Fibonacci sequence is where each number is the sum of the two before it. So, for example, 1 and 1 equals 2, 1 and 2 equals 3, 2 and 3 equals 5, and so on. And if you divide two consecutive Fibonacci numbers, you get 1.618, which is known as the golden ratio. Now, why does this actually matter? Well, it's because this exact ratio keeps showing up everywhere in nature. So for example, sunflowers arrange their seeds in spirals that follow Fibonacci numbers. Dolphins, insects, and even like human DNA contain patterns related to the golden ratio. And even galaxies form spiral arms that follow Fibonacci sequences.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm convinced about that, because like, does that really mean it's a simulation? Because maybe it's just the way that nature organizes itself, and we've applied sort of like the Fibonacci sequence to nature retrospectively.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's like a big discussion in simulation theory. But this is where it does get interesting because, yeah, like as you said, the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio are not proof of a simulation, right? Like they're examples of, like you said, emergent complexity, which means that basically like intricate patterns can arise naturally without necessarily needing a designer. Like maybe they're following the laws of physics, yeah? But think about it. No one programmed sunflowers to spiral the way that they do. It just happens because it's the most efficient way to pack seeds. And galaxies follow the same spiral because of gravity and angular momentum. I don't know, mentioning angular momentum just makes me laugh because of that Origins of Space episode. If you know, you know. But this ties back into chaos theory because, like we said, if we were in a simulation, you'd expect reality to follow a fixed, stable script. But instead, yes, we see a universe where tiny changes can trigger massive, unpredictable effects, like how a butterfly flapping its wings in like Mexico can cause a tornado in the USA. Yeah. And that is a perfect example of how small random events shape realities in ways that would be incredibly hard to simulate. And people argue that if our world was programmed, wouldn't there be safeguards to stop that level of chaos? But here is the paradox, that within that chaos, we still see repeating mathematical patterns like the Fibonacci sequence. And some people do argue that this proves an underlying code, like how video game developers use procedural generation to create natural looking environments. But others argue that the patterns emerge because that's just how physics works. Like atoms form molecules, molecules form structures, and the rules of energy and growth just naturally lead to these patterns. So does chaos theory debunk the simulation hypothesis? Not entirely. Some say that the chaos is actually part of the illusion, like to make the simulation feel more real. But the sheer unpredictability of reality suggests that we are in an evolving system rather than a controlled one. Whether or not that's part of the illusion or part of the simulation, maybe we'll never know.
Okay, so far it's giving like we're seeing mathematical precision and patterns. But could that not just be generally how nature works? Like, I'm just sat here now trying to think about what reality would look like if we were currently living in a simulation. Like, what is reality? I'm asking all the big questions.
But for me, the real question isn't really like whether the universe could be a simulation. It's whether it actually needs to be one to explain what we see. Yeah, and that kind of ties into what we've just spoke about. And that brings us to one of the strangest things in physics. I'm so excited for you guys to hear this: quantum mechanics. So if reality was simulated, we would expect to find glitches, evidence that it doesn't behave like a solid objective world. We hinted on this at the start. And quantum mechanics, well, it is full of those glitches. So let's quickly talk about rendering. So if you've ever played, like you said, Zelda, for example, an open world video game, you know that the game doesn't render the entire world at once, yeah? So to save processing power, it only loads what is in your direct line of sight. So if you turn around, new objects appear while the ones behind you disappear. It feels seamless, but behind the scenes, the game is literally just saving resources. Now, what if reality worked in the exact same way? So what if the universe doesn't exist in a definitive state until it is observed by us? And that might sound ridiculous, but actually it is in fact exactly what quantum mechanics suggests.
Wait, so you mean reality might not actually be real until someone looks at it? Or like the only thing that is real is like what you're observing currently? Like, I'm in my flat. I always think this, right? I'm in my flat on my own and I'm talking to you, Liv.
To me,
and like
yeah.
in this moment me and you exist, but
Yes.
like
does everybody else exist?
Everyone outside might just not exist to me, or might not be a reality to me.
Well, by the laws of quantum mechanics, they are in a definitive, like they're not in a definitive state. So let's get into it, because that is quite literally what happens. So this is exactly what the double slit experiment showed. And honestly, this experiment, it broke physics. So scientists set up a barrier with two slits. So they're in a room, there's a wall at the end of the room, obviously. They've put a barrier in between and they've cut two holes in the barrier, yeah? Now they are firing tiny particles like electrons or photons at it. Behind the barrier is that wall, or like a screen, to detect where the electrons land when they pass through these little holes that we've cut out. Now, if electrons are just tiny solid objects, they should pass through one slit or the other, forming two distinct bands on the screen. Simple, right? Except that is not what happened. So when no one measured which slit the electrons passed through, they actually acted like waves, going through both slits at the same time and interfering with themselves, creating a wave-like pattern on the screen. But the moment scientists measured which slit an electron went through, the wave pattern disappeared, and the electrons suddenly acted like individual particles, only going through one slit. It was almost as if the electrons knew they were being watched and decided to behave differently. So naturally, the scientists thought, okay, what if we just slowly creep up, quietly unplug the detector, and then see if the electrons keep on acting weird? And guess what? The second they stopped measuring, the wave pattern came back, as if the electrons were like, okay, cool, you're not watching us, like, let's go back to being a wave. So that was a lot, but let's summarize that by saying that when the electrons know that they are being observed or watched, they behave differently compared to when they think they're not being watched.
In my mind, when you say that, it's kind of like before they're being like observed, they have the potential to be multiple states or like options. And then as soon as they're observed, it's like they have to like pick one.
Exactly.
That's how my brain interprets that. But like, I just don't know. So that's just so weird.
So related to that, in 2019, scientists ran an even crazier experiment, one that suggested that different people do in fact experience different realities at the same time. And it's called Wigner's friend experiment. And it literally sounds straight out of a sci-fi novel. So imagine we have two scientists, Alice and Bob. Alice is inside a sealed lab and she is measuring a quantum particle. Now, the second she takes a measurement, the particle's wave function collapses, meaning that it takes on a definitive state. So it decides which slit it's going to pass through, yeah? But Bob, who is outside the lab, he hasn't measured anything yet because he's not in the lab. So he doesn't know what the electron is doing, yeah? So as far as his reality is concerned, the particle is still in superposition. When we say superposition, we just mean that it hasn't taken on a definitive state yet. So it's like still 50-50 of like what slit it's going to go through. So it exists in multiple states at once. So that sounds confusing. Let me break it down. So imagine Alice has a cat in a sealed lab. Inside the box, there is a mechanism controlled by a quantum particle, which has a 50-50 chance of putting the cat to sleep or leaving it awake. So as soon as Alice opens the box, she observes a definite outcome. So the cat is either asleep or awake, meaning that the quantum state collapses into one reality for her. However, Bob, who is outside of the lab, hasn't observed anything yet. So from his perspective, the cat is still in a quantum superposition, both awake and asleep at the same time, just like before a quantum particle is measured. Now, in a classical world, you'd expect that Alice and Bob's realities would match once they compare notes. But in 2019, scientists ran an experiment suggesting that this isn't necessarily the case. So when Alice and Bob compared their results, they found that at one point they had experienced two different realities. So Alice saw the definitive outcome, but Bob's reality still held both possibilities. The experiment implies that different people can experience different realities at the same time. And if true, this shakes the foundation of how we understand the universe, suggesting that reality itself might be subjective, or even more bizarrely, that it depends on who's observing it and when they are observing it.
It's kind of mind-blowing, really. I don't even know how to respond to that. That's actually crazy.
It's like, it's really simple, but it's really like, it's very philosophical. It really gets you thinking. And it's like, yeah, that's so obvious. Like, you don't know until you know. And yeah, it's like Alice can come out and tell you, but that wasn't really a reality that you actually observed. You're just accepting that that is reality based on what Alice is telling you. So is it really reality? Do you know what I mean? It's very philosophical.
Yeah. Wasn't there like another physics study that was looking at their like linked particles or something, and while she observed one,
oh my god, Taz, you are like foreshadowing so much in this episode. Like, you actually know quite a lot. Like, how do you know all of this?
Because I was gobsmacked. I'm telling you.
You love Brian Cox.
But I didn't really think how that relates to simulation theory, so I never like really put two and two together. So it's actually really interesting to see it in this context, because I was just like, wow, two particles acting like weirdly when you don't observe them. But like now when you're putting in the context of this, it's like, oh my god, this actually might be a reality, or like multiple universes or something. Do you know what I mean? When people say like, oh, they're like multiple universes,
parallel universes.
If there's like multiple realities, then it's kind of like, that's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Like parallel universe, multiple realities.
What defines a parallel universe? But let's like go into a little bit of what you've just hinted at. So for the listeners, if reality is observer dependent, then what happens when two particles become linked together no matter how far apart they are. And that is, like Taz said, exactly what happens in quantum entanglement. That's the term for it. So imagine you have two particles, say like two electrons. If they become entangled, it means they are linked together. So now, no matter how far apart they are, if you change one, the other one changes instantly. And it doesn't matter if they're right next to each other or if they are literally on opposite ends of the universe. The information between them will update immediately, faster than light.
So I guess
That's
my question is, are they secretly communicating with each other? Or like, I don't know, is the simulation allowing them to communicate?
Yeah. Well, that's the strange part, right? Like, there's no actual physical signal traveling between them. There's no force, there's no waves, there's no hidden messenger. They just literally update simultaneously as if they are connected outside of space and time. And if we are in a simulation, that actually makes perfect sense, because if we think about how video games work, if you are playing like an online multiplayer game and two players are interacting, their actions update instantly on the server. Doesn't matter if they're standing right next to each other or if they're on opposite sides of the world in the game. The system just syncs the data immediately because they're both part of the same program. And quantum entanglement looks exactly like that. It's as if these particles aren't actually separate objects, but they're just two bits of the underlying system, like values being updated in a running program.
So you're basically saying that entangled particles aren't really communicating, they're just changing state together, like they're two linked data points in a simulation or like a game, as you've just described.
Exactly. And that's just so unsettling, because it suggests that like reality isn't built the way that we think it is. Like, if entanglement can ignore space and time, then like what even is space and time?
And if that's true, then what happens when no one's watching as well? Like, I've always thought, does something exist if literally it's not being observed at all? Is it running in the background? Do you know what I mean? And if reality can be different for different people, why doesn't that happen all the time? Like, surely it would happen all the time. What forces everything to sync up? So I guess we all agree on one version of events.
Yeah, that is a good question. So it's like quite a big argument against like this whole theory, right? But on a large scale, eventually everything aligns because of how particles interact and like they like lock in this shared reality. So at the quantum level, before something interacts with the rest of the world, it really does exist in multiple states at once. And this brings us to something even stranger, John Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, which suggests that the past isn't actually fixed either.
Mm-hmm.
So John Wheeler was a legendary physicist who coined the term black hole, and he proposed a version of the double slit experiment to test whether observation affects only the present or if you can actually reach back into the past. So scientists set up the usual double slit setup, but with a twist this time. So this time they delayed the decision to measure the electrons until after they had already passed through the slits, but before they hit the screen. And here is what happened. So even though the electrons had already traveled through the slits, they still changed their behavior retroactively based on whether or not they were measured. It was as if they actually went back in time and rewrote their own history to match the observation. And what's even crazier is that scientists later repeated this experiment using light from galaxies millions of light years away, and the photons behaved as if they had known millions of years ago that they were going to be observed in the present, and they adjusted their state retroactively. So let's take everything we have talked about so far: quantum mechanics behaving like a rendering engine, the double slit experiment, and let's ask the next logical question. Could an advanced intelligence have built this? Because if a simulation like this exists, it did obviously, like, it didn't just appear out of nowhere, yeah? Someone or something had to create it.
Yeah, and if that is the case, then we're talking about a civilization with computing power surely so advanced it makes everything we've ever built look like a rock and a stick, essentially.
Yeah, literally. The sheer scale of what you'd need to simulate a universe is like quite literally incomprehensible. There are roughly 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the observable universe. And like, if you put that a number on a screen, you will be like, what the hell? And simulating all of that is at the atomic level in real time would require an impossible amount of computing power, far beyond anything that we can currently imagine. So this is another really big idea, argument for why we can't be in a simulation because computing power doesn't exist. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's kind of dumb, because we would have said 50 years ago, AI is never going to be possible because we don't have the computing power. Like, now we do. But here's the trick. You wouldn't have to simulate everything at once. So just like a video game engine only renders what the player sees, an advanced simulation wouldn't waste resources on every single atom when no one is looking. So instead, it would fill the gaps only when needed, much like the quantum weirdness that we talked about earlier, where reality does not take on a definitive state until you observe it. And suddenly, simulating an entire universe doesn't seem so impossible. Maybe not for us yet, but for a civilization that's thousands, millions, or even billions of years ahead, that's a completely different story. And this is where quantum computing comes in. So classical computers process information in binary, ones and zeros, but quantum computers use qubits, which can exist in multiple states at once thanks to superposition. This allows them to perform calculations that would take classical computers millions of years in a fraction of the time. We spoke about this on the Origins of AI episode when we spoke about the 𝗾𝘁𝗃𝗁𝗃 chips from Google. Now, imagine a sufficiently advanced alien civilization, one that has mastered quantum computing at a scale far beyond anything that we've built. Instead of brute forcing a classical simulation of every particle in the universe, they could actually use quantum systems to generate probabilistic outcomes, meaning that they wouldn't need to calculate every single detail, just the parts that matter. And this would work exactly like how our own quantum mechanics operates, where particles don't have definitive states until observed. So maybe that's not just like a weird quirk of physics, but maybe it's actually a computational shortcut in the simulation.
Okay, but if that's true and we're inside a simulation right now, then where are the people run it? Like, I kind of touched on it before. If we are in a simulation, then what is reality? And if there are advanced civilizations out there, why haven't we seen them?
Yeah, that's known as like the Fermi paradox, isn't it? So like, I think that's the idea that if intelligent life is common, then like, where is everybody? And one possible answer is the transension hypothesis. This is the idea that instead of expanding outward into space, super advanced civilizations might have literally done the opposite. They turned inward. So if we think about it, the more advanced a species becomes, the smaller and more efficient its technology gets. So instead of building like massive energy consuming megastructures in space, they could literally reach a point where they no longer need physical space at all. And we spoke about this on the consciousness episode, but they could, like we said, upload their consciousness into hyper-realistic simulations, living in infinitely detailed digital worlds of their own creation. And if a civilization reaches this stage, it would be virtually undetectable from the outside because they would have left the physical universe behind. So the simulation hypothesis is basically an explanation as to why we've never seen aliens.
And that would make sense, right? Because we're talking about escaping our reality and potentially going into a metaverse and creating our own simulation with the technology that we're gaining over time. So we're literally doing that. So that's actually like a good point in my mind. How close are we to actually doing something like that?
Closer than you would think. So Moore's law states that computational power doubles roughly every 18 months. And while that's slowing down, the long-term trend is clear. Our ability to process and store information is skyrocketing. So given another 50, 100, or 1,000 years, there is literally no reason we would not be able to create a fully immersive, self-sustaining world. And once a civilization reaches that point, it brings us back to Bostrom's simulation trilemma.
Right. So the idea that if a civilization can create realistic simulations, they'd probably create millions of them.
Yeah, and that's called the simulation point, which is basically like defined as the moment when a civilization has reached the computing power and knowledge to create perfectly immersive digital realities. And once you reach that point, you don't just create one simulation, you create millions. So in other words, there's like simulations inside simulations. And if that's the case, the odds that we are in one base reality rather than one of the countless simulations is almost non-existent.
And I feel like we're already creeping up with that level with AI, quantum computing, like you said, and I guess brain interfaces like Neuralink. We touched on it on the consciousness episode.
Yeah, literally, like Neuralink's such a good point. We've done a whole episode on how Neuralink works. So like if you're about to listen to what I'm going to say and you're going to be like, girl, you're actually crazy, you've lost your mind, please go back and listen to the Neuralink episode because like they are doing all of this. So Neuralink, like the main goal was to help, for example, like paraplegics, but the long-term vision is a seamless connection between humans and digital worlds. So imagine a future where you don't just like play a game, but you actually experience it. not with a controller, not with a VR headset, but by directly interfacing with your brain. So like when you're in the game, you'll be able to feel the wind, the warmth of the sun, the texture of the objects. And yeah, you think I'm crazy, but they literally have already proved that they can like allow people to play games using literally their brain.
So I actually feel like I don't want to believe the simulation theory because it's actually too much for my mind to comprehend. But I feel like the selling point of it is the quantum particles and how like
100%.
they change under observation. Like that's actually just creepy.
Yeah,
And if
literally,
anything,
and
that means there's like multiple possible realities, like which could be nature in of itself. But even just the fact that there can be multiple realities within one is kind of scary prospect anyway.
yeah, 100%. And like obviously we try and focus like more on the science, but there's a lot more to simulation theory that is really, really interesting. And there's a lot more science to simulation theory that like obviously we didn't have the time to talk about, because I feel like today is already like a long episode because there's so much to get into with the simulation theory. So if you're interested in it, like there are books on it, there's so many good YouTube videos on it. But like I have to say, like, I am fully convinced. I'm not saying we are living in a simulation, but I am fully ready to accept that there is statistically a very high chance that we are in a simulation. And like, it doesn't mean that we need to get out and like, oh my God, panic. But like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm fully accepting that we are possibly in a simulation. But Taz, what do you think?
The Mandela effect thing really rubs me up the wrong way. It's probably like the one with the least scientific backing behind it. And obviously I mentioned like the quantum particles. That kind of freaks me out a bit. Like I just couldn't actually wrap my head around it.
Can I just say though, like, I know I'm not shutting the up, but can I just say, because you just said, oh, like the Mandela effect has the most scientific backing, but it's like, if science is part of the simulation, then anything we discover, like psychology, is technically part of the simulation.
Right, I'm gonna spitball here, right? So taking into account Mandela effects and how you observe the quantum particles that change it, whether you observe them or not, right? That would back up why in the past we observed the Monopoly man with a monocle.
Yes.
But now, now that we're in the future, when we look back, the past has changed because the quantum particles have changed their behavior for whatever reason. Like our memories are actually served correct, but the particles changed retrospectively since that point, if you know what I mean. Like reality changed.
Exactly.
And that's why there's like no evidence of it. But I'm just like, is that evidence of a simulation, or is that just like an example of reality? Like that is just the reality that we're experiencing.
I think that is a really hard question to answer because we're never really going to know the answer to that. However, what I think we have to do is like accept what is literally happening in the world around us. Like quantum computing is becoming a thing. AI is expanding. So I think when we take in all of that knowledge, I personally feel like it's so easy for me to accept the possibility that we are in fact inside a simulation.
Okay, if simulation theory is like a real thing and we are living in a simulation, then what happens when we die? Is that fake?
It depends on how it depends on how the simulation runs, doesn't it? Like what, you know?
Because that could be a very good argument for afterlife. If we were living in a simulation now and then we died, we came out of the simulation, then that would be like,
but where do we go in?
We would know. Where do we go
after this? And it also depends on like what is the purpose of the simulation as well, because what's the purpose of the simulation? But I would love to hear from my listeners, what do you guys think would be the purpose of the simulation? Because I think that is a philosophical question that I don't really know the answer to.
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to know their thoughts too, and if they think that we are living in a simulation. But yeah, I loved that episode. I think it's probably going to be one of my favourite episodes of this series, to be honest. If you guys want to learn anything more about this, we'll always leave some links in the description. But for now, let's move on to our laboraTEA.
Taz, do you know that feeling when you've been staring at a blank screen, trying to start like a literature review or a research paper, and your brain literally just refuses to cooperate? It is so overwhelming. And honestly, I feel like sometimes just getting started is the hardest part.
Yeah, Liv, honestly, I relate to that so much. And I bet our listeners can too. And that's why we wanted to share 𝗄𝘂𝗂𝗃 with you guys. It's this really cool AI tool that helps you kickstart your writing. Think of it like having a brainstorming buddy who can help you get your ideas down on paper without the stress of figuring out where to begin.
Yeah, it is great for those moments when you know what you want to say, but you can't quite find the right words. So the way that it works is that basically you just give it a prompt. For example, you might say, I'm writing a literature review about climate change. And then 𝗄𝘂𝗂𝗃 will suggest sentences and phrases to help get the ball rolling. So you're not just sitting there staring at a blinking cursor.
And if you're like me and you hate dealing with citations, because let's be real, they actually take forever, 𝗄𝘂𝗂𝗃 can handle them for you in multiple ways. So if you need sources, 𝗄𝘂𝗂𝗃 can find relevant research papers online and generate citations with just a few clicks. And if you're working with specific papers, you can upload your own sources and 𝗄𝘂𝗂𝗃 will pull the citations from them instead.
So if that sounds like something you'd find helpful, check out 𝗄𝘂𝗂𝗃 and see how it works for you. We'll pop the link in today's episode description along with a discount code so that you can get money off as well.
Honestly, anything that makes academic writing less painful. Okay, guys, welcome to the newest segment of our laboraTEA. Obviously, every season we try and mix it up and give you something different. So for this season, we are asking you guys a question of the week, and we'll be discussing your answers in this section of the laboraTEA. So we're super excited. So basically what we've done is we've asked you questions relating to your work in like a STEM related field, and hopefully we get some spicy answers that we can tell you guys about on the podcast. So with that being said, Liv, what was the first question that we asked our listeners?
Okay, so the first question that we asked you guys was, what is the craziest / weirdest story you have heard about a PI? And I feel like this is going to get a bit crazy. So let's get into the answers. So number one answer was, he invited a bunch of interns, in brackets, 22 to 25-year-olds, to his house, and he went to a club with them. Can you imagine going clubbing with your PI? Like, are you guys all right? No, would I do that? Maybe I would, because like that's kind of like for the plot. Do you know what I mean? That's funny.
Gosh, I feel like on your like work Christmas parties though, you sometimes end up at the club afterwards. So,
do you?
I definitely have.
What, with your PI? Oh yeah, you shared a vape with him, didn't you?
That was at a conference, but
Never forget. The same thing.
Never forget.
It's like technically he's not doing anything illegal because like they're 22, 25 years. It's like that is morally illegal, but legally legal. Do you know what I mean? Like weird, but like not a sackable offense. But I don't know. And like, what were they doing at his house? Like, I think we spoke about this before, but it is quite common. Like, I do know quite a few lab groups who like go to their PI's house for like Sunday brunch or something. And I'm like,
I don't know about that. Lab group, I've got a like they run a conference every year, and like before they start it, some postdocs are invited to the PI's house. But I feel like postdocs is less weird than PhD students.
I agree. Because normally we're older. Normally.
Yeah. I don't think you'd catch me dead going to my PI's house. Screw that.
Nah, me neither. Like, I don't want to know what the inside of your house is. I don't want to know what your living room looks like. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to know where you like stand in your dressing gown and make your cup of coffee. Like, I just don't need to know this information. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't need to know it.
I'm really not sure that the listener had that in mind when he or she messaged, but yeah, fair enough.
What can I say? But let's really deep, like, go into a club with your supervisor. Like, are we ordering shots? What are we doing when a man comes to flirt with us and your PI is like there? Are we going to the smoking area with the PI? Are we dancing? Yeah, true. Are we on the dance floor with the PI?
I'm pretty sure I've got a round of Jaeger bombs to my PI, so...
Okay, so you would go into the club, like, straight up to the bar, shots ordered.
Yeah, 100%.
And then we get on the dance floor and S&M by Rihanna starts playing. What are we doing?
I don't know, twerking.
on your PI or in front?
No, that's where I draw the line. I also draw the line at going to their house. I just think that's weird.
Imagine if I saw him flirting with someone. Like, that would
Imagine
send
if
me
you
over the
shared a
edge.
vape.
Oh no, that would send me over the fucking edge. I couldn't handle it. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. So someone else said that one of the most unhinged things they've heard about a PI is that one of the professors from organic chemistry used to have sex with students in his office. Can I just say, why is it always organic chemistry? What is up with the chemists? Because it's always organic chemistry, like, and it's never inorganic chemistry. It's always organic chemistry. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's so true. I don't know.
Do you think they just like need their biology fix? Like, I'm not judging no one, because you know what, we've spoken about this before, and it's consensual. As long as it's consensual to adults, nobody's underage. But like,
it's just rogue doing it in his office though. Like,
it's fucking rogue, because even if it was Pietra, like, I still would be like, why don't we just meet up outside? Of why have we got to do it in the office? But I guess some people get thrown off.
It's giving Matt Hancock.
Oh my gosh, that had been wiped from my memory. So for any of the listeners who like aren't British, or maybe you are British and you don't know, like, our health secretary during COVID-19, like during the lockdowns, was having an affair with his PA, and there's literally CCTV of them necking off in his office, and it like got out. And like, how is that not a bigger scandal in UK politics? Because we all really just let that go.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we're all like,
no, I don't think it was let go, because she was like the wife of someone who was like really rich, and she had a lot of fingers in pies relating to PPE and stuff, and like, it was all a bit weird.
Well, she got fired, but he just got given another position, so. But anyway, it is giving Matt Hancock. I personally wouldn't, because imagine you're having sex with another PI and then your own PI caught you.
God, but then you
just anyone catching
Pietro, and now I'm like
debating it.
Could be an exception to the rule.
No, but why wouldn't you just meet up outside, or like, because obviously they weren't that discreet, because everybody, like, she knows about it, so they can't have been that discreet, because and like, it says students plural, so like several students. Ooh. Maybe
that's where I would draw the line. I'm like, if it's not just me, then forget it. That's just weird.
If I'm the only student you'll fuck, then I guess we'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay, another answer. He showed an undergraduate his ass.
That is just such a blunt sentence. Like, sorry, where is the context? Do you just put his pants down?
Just literally like moonied. Is that what it's called? Like moonie? What? Why is it called a moonie?
That's so random. I don't know, because it's like your ass looks like a moon.
Sorry, what? What do you mean your ass looks like a moon?
Because it's white.
Oh, okay. But yeah, where is the? We need the context. Like, what do you mean he showed in? Like, was they in some kind of like biology medical lesson? Like, maybe they were talking about like freckles or warts or something, and he was like, "Okay, like, I've got one. Let me show you." or no, because this context is important. Or was it like he was literally just randomly like, "Yeah, here's my fast." Why has that tickled you so much?
Because I'm sorry. How did your brain go from he showed me his ass to like maybe had a wart or something?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of logical reasons.
That's not even logical.
I know it's not, but it's the most logical I could come up with in the moment. Okay, like, I don't know what else
would be
would
more
be
logical is if he had like a hairy ass and he was like, "Oh, I just got my bum."
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. That would not be logical at all. Like,
oh my god.
Whoever that listener is, like, can you email in with some more context, please, that story, because we'll make that a whole laboraTEA. Because like, did he have a hairy ass? Did he have a freckle on his ass? Or was he just pulling a moonie? A moonie that makes me laugh.
Tears in my eyes.
Oh, okay. Next one. What unhinged things have you done at work / the lab, and why? Okay, first one. I put an air mattress and slept there because I had a 5 a.m. meeting. I was in Brazil and the other side was in the UK. I've heard of this before. I have known people in my lab to literally sleep under their desks. Like they're like writing their thesis and they want a nap, so they've slept like underneath their desks overnight, and then like just woke up super early. And I'm like, what the hell?
To be fair, I really went through that phase in my PhD because my work was like 2 hours drive from where I lived. So I would sometimes get into work like so early, and then I would be doing like stuff in the lab all day, and it would get to like 8 p.m. and I'd be like, I have to be in at like 9 o'clock in the morning tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm like, I might as well just sleep here.
Just sleep.
You have times where that thought crossed my mind.
Well, these people put those thoughts into action. They are go-getters, you know.
Fair enough.
Like they did it. And I agree, fair enough. Like, go for it. If you've got a 5 a.m. meeting, like, yeah, why go home? Just chill out there. Especially if you're a man, right? Because they don't really have to like do their makeup, their hair. Not that every single female does do that. And yeah, some men do it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what men are like 4-in-1 shampoo, conditioner, body wash.
I've also known people to do like all-nighters at the lab sometimes. Like,
surely that's dangerous.
All through the
especially
night.
in like a virology lab. Like, are you okay? Like,
oh, it wasn't in virology. It's like at my current lab now. Like, people.
I was gonna say, like, you arrive in the morning and like they've turned into a fucking like werewolf or something.
Well, they were still there. Yeah, like, people turn up in the morning and they're like still going, and it's like, you've not gone home. Like, what?
Yeah, it's literally not okay. I actually love this next response. Like, I love it. It says, I used dry ice to chill my Coke because it was 30 degrees outside. Do you know what, Fairs? So like, actually, Fairs. Like, who wants a warm Coke? Not me.
I know, and it's going to chill it instantly as well.
Yeah, that's actually such a good idea, because there's nothing beats a like ice cold crisp Diet Coke, like a warm lukewarm Diet Coke. It just doesn't hit the same, and there's no point in drinking it.
Why would you want to wait for it to cool down as well when you've got dry ice, which can do it like pretty much instantly?
Exactly, it's resourceful if you ask me.
Yeah,
it's a bit dangerous.
You are a woman or a guy in STEM. Using that to your advantage.
Okay, moving on to our final question of the week. And before I read out this last question, just a reminder that if you want to get involved in any of these question of the weeks, make sure you're following us on Instagram, because we do post these on Instagram and we'd love to hear all of your answers. But with that said, the last question is, have you ever broken work code of conduct, and why? First answer, me and my partner were in the same lab and we scouted out the lab for good places to shag.
What?
I feel like our listeners are getting way too comfortable with us. Like, who gave you guys the audacity to be this comfortable with us?
I know. But Liv, if you had to do that and decide where the best place was, where do you think it would be?
On Taz, it's such an easy answer.
Oh, really? Oh.
The air mattress. Under the desk. Nah, for real, I do not condone this behaviour. I can't lie. So, like, do I have any places to offer? No, because I think it's weird. I'm sorry, maybe that's a bit harsh. But I just think, you know, like, maybe not in the lab.
Some people, that's like a kink for some people, though.
I know, but there's many things that are kinks that shouldn't be.
True.
Okay, next one. Someone said they stole PPE, in brackets, face masks and gloves during COVID and sold them on at a profit. I'm sorry. But...
well, surely either way it's going to be a profit because you stole them. You didn't even buy them.
Yeah, literally. I think more what they say is, yeah, I think that's what they're trying to say. Like, they wasn't being like a good civilian and giving them out to like save their neighbours and like save their co-workers. It's given Tory, really, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It is given Tory, yeah. I was going to say, not going to lie, crossed my mind once, but obviously the difference is I didn't actually do it. I just stole it for my own personal use.
Exactly that. Like, you know, I've stole technically PPE. Like, when I used to not work in the lab, but when I used to like be in the lab for my undergrad, I would always steal gloves to dye my hair. But selling it on for a profit during COVID, that is so harsh. Questionable behaviour, to be honest.
I mean, entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If the Tories were doing it, why can't you?
Do we want to be following in the Tories' footsteps? That is the question of today's episode.
No.
That is the question of the week.
Devil's advocate.
Yeah, that is pretty. I feel like all of them were so unhinged. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
yeah,
who are these people who listen to this podcast? Do you know what I mean? You guys are crazy.
Maybe they're just a reflection of us, Liv.
Yeah, I mean, fairs. Yeah, I mean, we are not having sex in the lab, but like we have done questionable things. So
yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, you guys will have to let us know if you enjoyed our new segment, Question of the Week. And with that, that rounds up episode 3 of the 𝗃𝘁𝗁 podcast Debunked. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Taz, can you quickly let us in on what we're going to be covering next week?
Yeah, next week we are covering the flat Earth theory. Now, is there any scientific basis for the Earth being flat? Where did it come from? And is our Earth actually flat?
Oh my God, I'm excited for that. Okay, we will see you guys next week in episode 4. Bye, everyone.
Bye.